Get things rolling. All right, folks, let me just close this door up a little bit for us so we can stay right here. All right. You good? Everybody comfortable here? Warm, cold? All right, so let's get this started. So, first off, thank you guys for being here. My name is Bill Watson. I'm the service manager for Presidential Pools here. I've been here just about 17 years now, and we started this just about 2 years ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago. And this does for a group class. I'm going to give you guys some information. I know it's a lot to learn when we meet you guys at your home. You know, you got all this equipment, you got people, and it's a lot of equipment, a lot of stuff to know. So we started this just to kind of show you and help you feel a little bit more comfortable with the pool. You know, I'll go over, I'm no speaker, this isn't set up, I just walk in here and give you the best information that I can to try and teach you and make it easier for you, in other words. So I'm going to go over nothing but water chemistry. I'll go over basically all the basics for you. If there's anything I don't go over for some reason, just get me after the class. I'll go over anything in detail with you, or anything about programming or how to clean a salt cell type stuff. But I'll go over anything individual. But if I don't touch up, just grab me after the class, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. So for starters, the biggest thing I wanted to go over is just the most important chemistry readings that you should be taking care of as far as water chemistry goes. But before I do anything, we have some online, Andrew. What I like to do is I like to introduce everybody because I like to know who you are. So we do have some online people here, some attendees. Let's just go over those real quick. Bill Harris, Candy Beebe, Doug Bongard, Francine Riddell, Harvinder Kumar, Javier Kowalski, Lana Hitchens. Hi, Lana. How are you? Lenny Bowman, Nina Kelso. Hi, Nina. Rodney Knight, Sean Randall, Siggy Lopez, Warren White, and William Valdez. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but thank you for being online. But as you can see, you don't have to be here. You can be online and enjoy the own comfort of your home. So if you don't mind, I'm terrible with names, as all of us men in here are, but we're good with faces. So I'd like to start from the back left there. What's your name? Where are you from?
My name's Roberto.
Hi, Roberto. Santan, thanks for being here. The better half? Yeah. Hi, Gina. Hi, James. That was a long drive, huh? Yeah, there you go. I appreciate it. Hi, thank you. Thank you for being here. Where are you from? Surprise. You took a long drive, so that webinar might help you out. Didn't know about it? Well, we wanted to get you here anyway, you know. Oh, okay. That's not too bad then. That's way to time things out.
Jerry Lynn, Queen Creek.
Hi, Jerry.
Mike Howard, Goodyear.
Goodyear.
John Kafka, Patio Junction.
Oh, nice. Well, you didn't take too bad of a drive here.
Tara.
Hi, Tara. Hi, Tara. Better half.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, nice. Thanks for the drive. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. So yeah, let's just go over chemistry. And like I said, I'm going to hit the basics, but if you have any questions afterwards, just get with me. So most people think the most important chemical for your pool is chlorine, right? And it's just called basically free chlorine. And the reason why most people think that chlorine is the most important chemical in your pool is because that's what keeps it clear and clean looking, right? The biggest misconception of that is the most important chemical test that you can test for and keep in range is called pH and alkalinity, okay? pH is probably the most important chemical that you need to keep balanced because it keeps the general balance of your pool. What it does is it allows the chlorine to do its job properly. It keeps the basic standard sanitization of the pool. It makes everything work properly and allows the chlorine to do its thing. So pH is your most important test, and I highly recommend you keep a close eye on your pH because pH can do a few things. It can allow buildup on the tile. We all seen the buildup on the tile already, white calcium buildup. That helps promote that. It also helps eye irritation, skin irritation. So the most important chemical level is going to be your pH, and the pH level should be between 7.2 and 7.6. 7.2 and 7.6, okay? Most ideal range. Now, the biggest thing about this that I like to bring up is your eyes, okay? Your eyes pH are 7.2 to 7.4, okay? So anything under 7.2, you're going to feel it in your eyes when you're swimming. Anything above 7.6 or 7.4, you're going to feel it in your eyes. So the reason you have the irritation of the eyes is primarily most people contribute that to chlorine. There's way too much chlorine in the water. Well, the false thing about that is it has nothing to do with that. It's just because your pH is out of balance, right? So the biggest thing in Arizona that affects pH is temperature, right? We have probably the highest temperature in the United States as far as I'm concerned. And what happens is it drives the pH sky high quite a bit. So the biggest thing we make a mistake at is we're good at checking pH and adjusting pH, but the problem with pH is it raises up very quickly, primarily raises up, okay? So that means when you test your water, primarily it's going to be high, and high is about 8.0 and above, right? So what happens is we add what's called muriatic acid, and muriatic acid lowers the pH level, right? So what happens is, let's say on a Monday we check our pH, we add and we say, oh, it's high, okay? So now you've created an irritating water for your eyes, and you've created a basic calcium problem that's going to be in the water. It's going to promote that hard, you know, line that's around the pool water and on their filters and so forth. So what happens is we check it on a Monday, and we add our muriatic acid, and then we wait a week, and we check it again, and we go, oh, it's high again, and we add the acid. So as normal humans, we just get repetitive, and we go, oh, it's high, we add the chemical, and that puts it down into the proper level, and then the next time we test it, it's high again. Well, the problem is because we're not checking it periodically, we're only checking it once a week, in this state, it's just not enough, right? So what I would like you guys to do, if you really want to keep an eye on your pH level, is to test the water twice a week if possible. Now, I know it's tough to test water, you know what I mean? I'm probably worst at it myself, even being in the pool business. But the fact is if you want to keep an eye on your pH, check it twice a week, because within 2 days, 2 to 3 days, that pH is already starting to rise up again and already getting out of that ideal range, which is 7.2 to 7.6. Okay? If for some reason you have a low pH, which is very uncommon, right? I wouldn't say very uncommon, but primarily you're going to get 1 out of maybe 50 pools that have a situation where the pH is always low. Very, very rarely. But you would use what's called soda ash to raise the pH, okay? Like I said, most people don't even know what soda ash is. It's just an uncommon situation. But let me just explain the pH. There's 3 parts to water chemistry. One is ideal or normal water in the pool. Then you have what's called corrosive water, and then you have what's called a scaling water. So you have 3 parts. One's scaling, one's normal, one's corrosive, right? So pH in the ideal range is normal. Everything's perfect, okay? If the pH is low, below 7.2, okay, 7.0, 6.8, in that general range, it's called corrosive. What corrosive pH does is it will promote staining of the interior. It will promote pebble loss in the interior, okay? It breaks down the cement in the pebble. It will break down metals in your pool equipment, your pool pump, your filters. It's corrosive water. It will break down heat exchangers in your heaters, create holes. And people call us up, they say, hey, I've got a hole, my heater's leaking. 9 out of 10 times, almost 10 out of 10 times, is because the water chemistry has eaten a hole right through. That's how corrosive water can be. Here's the biggest thing I see. When I go to a pool and it's about 5 or 6 years old and the pool tile looks spotless, no calcium buildup on it at all, right? I go, is the water, I instantly know there's something not right with the water. And what happens is the pH is low, so it's acidic water. Well, muriatic acid, right, breaks down calcium. So because the water is acidic, it's not allowing that calcium to build up on the tile, which is a negative thing because you don't want corrosive water, right? So pH, very, very important. I highly recommend testing twice a week. 7.2 to 7.6 is the ideal range, okay? Don't worry about going out and buying soda ash. You're not going to need it, okay? Just buy muriatic acid. What I highly recommend is go to a pool supply store to buy muriatic acid. Lowe's and Home Depot are getting better at it, but what they do is they're selling a less percentage of acid, so you have to use more of it to lower the pH level. So you'd be better off spending 12 bucks instead of the $8 at Home Depot. Spend the 12 bucks at a pool supply store, okay? That's what I'm trying to get at. So you use less of it, it affects the pH faster, and it does the job for you, okay? Any questions in pH so far? But the most important test that you can do. So test twice a week and try to maintain that pH the best you can. Now, the second most important chemistry reading, go ahead, sir.
Question. When you add muriatic acid,
yes.
do you put it through the screen?
Great question. When you add muriatic acid is the question, and basically what you want to do is always turn your pump on first, okay? Get that water circulating. Anytime you add muriatic acid, acid is heavier than water, and it will fall right to the floor. So I highly recommend finding the deep end of your pool, the center of your pool, anywhere the steps and bench are not in the area. I have steps here and step here on my pool, so I go right to the center of my pool. I pour in what I need to pour in, okay? But even though you're adding the acid, the biggest thing for you to do is check it twice a week if possible, okay? That's the biggest key, is continue checking that pH, because before you know it, it's out of whack and it's creating a scenario for your pool, okay? And with the pH not being in balance, like I said, the chlorine, it's doing a disservice for you because it's not allowing the chlorine that's in your pool to kill the algae as good as it could be. So it's kind of, you know, preventing that chlorine from doing its job properly, okay? So it's ideal is to keep the pH straight. The next one is called alkalinity. Okay, alkalinity is what I think of it is called the cousin to pH, right? Alkalinity should be between 80 and 120. That's the ideal range. Now, again, alkalinity is just like the pH. If alkalinity is low, it's acidic and it's aggressive water, okay? If the alkalinity is high, it's basically a scaling scenario. That's where you're going to see buildup on the salt cell, buildup on the tile line, and everything else, right? So by keeping the alkalinity in check between 80 and 120 will prevent the bounce of your pH. Does that make sense? So really it's kind of, I call it a cousin of pH, right? So if you keep the alkalinity in line, it'll keep the pH in line to where it's more work friendly. In other words, it's going to work with you a little bit more. If your alkalinity is way out of whack, your pH is going to be bouncing all over the place. So that means you're going to need more chemical to adjust that. Does that make sense to everybody? So keep that alkalinity in check between 80 and 120. And the way to keep alkalinity in check is muriatic acid lowers alkalinity, and sodium bicarbonate raises alkalinity. Okay? Now, do anybody know what sodium bicarbonate is, ladies? You may know. Baking soda. Exactly. Go to Costco. Go spend $15, $20 on a big box of baking soda. It's a hell of a lot cheaper than alkalinity up. Okay? Basically, baking soda is the exact same thing. So in other words, don't go to the store and buy sodium bicarbonate. Go get yourself some Arm & Hammer baking soda. It's a lot cheaper. Of course, you can use it for other things as well. You know what I mean? So that's the ticket. So sodium bicarb / baking soda will increase the alkalinity. Muriatic acid will lower alkalinity. Okay? Now, primarily in most of our pools, like I said, 10 out of 10 pools, 9 out of 10 pools, the alkalinity and the pH raise up together, okay? And then what happens is you add the muriatic acid, and that affects both levels, and then they both come down together. Does that make sense, right? So what happens is, the reason I make this a point is some pools, very rarely, but some pool water, and you would think all the pool water would be the same, but remember, each one of our yards are different. Some have grass, some don't have grass, some have dirt around, some don't have dirt around. Some have people swimming in it every day. Some people don't have people swimming in it every day. Some people have animals swimming. So each case is different, you know what I mean? So what I'm trying to get at is try to keep both of those dialed in the best you can. So as they both raise up, okay, you're going to be adding muriatic acid. They're both going to lower down. In some cases, that alkalinity in some of your pools will stay stable, and then the pH will raise up on its own, okay? When that happens, you add muriatic acid to lower the pH, right? But what happens is, what happens to the alkalinity? Lowers, right? So now you have, instead of this happening, you have this happening, and then when you add the acid, the pH comes down to level, but this drops the alkalinity low, right? So then you have what's called a corrosive water, right? Aggressive water, surface problems. You start to get loss of stone, aggressive on the heat exchangers. So be very careful with that. That's when the sodium bicarb comes into play. So primarily, you won't be in this scenario, but if you are, the way to affect the alkalinity being low is to put baking soda in the water and get that alkalinity back up to normal, okay? So the key is with baking soda, again, turn the pump on, get it circulating. You can add the baking soda straight into the skimmer basket. The reason I say that, if you broadcast or take a cup of baking soda and toss it in the pool, it could cloudy the water up for you, you know what I mean? Just for a brief second. So you'd be better off turning the pump on, taking a cup. Now there's no specific ideal way or how much to add. Now there are charts out there online, and there's charts in these little test kits that'll say, okay, hey, if your alkalinity is this level, add this much chemical. So there's a lot of charts online, but the way I do it at my house, I add something, I let it run for 24 hours, and I check it again, and I find out, okay, it was 100. I added 1 cup of this, you know what I mean? How much did that affect it? And then I kind of go, okay, I need to do 2 more of these to get me to that level. Does that make sense? So there's really not a specific 1 cup will do it. It all depends. So what I'm saying is turn the pump on, get your baking soda, put your 1 cup of baking soda in there, let it run for about 24 hours, check that alkalinity again, and see how much that's raised it. And then you'll kind of go, okay, it raised it 20 parts per million. I need to add 2 more of those, or so forth, you know what I mean? So the key is keep that alkalinity in check, and that will help the bounce of the pH. Everybody okay with that so far? So the most 2 important things are pH and alkalinity, okay? The second thing is I'm going to bring up, or the third thing is it's called calcium hardness, right? I highly recommend that you keep an eye on calcium hardness. However, very, very, very tough to keep an eye on, okay? And here's the reason why. In Arizona, we have very hard water, as we all know, right? Very, very hard water. So what happens is we evaporate. There's 2 problems with calcium hardness in Arizona. Very high heat, so we get a very huge amount of evaporation. Let me give you a quick synopsis on evaporation. In the month of June and July, we lose about 11.67 inches of water through evaporation. You wouldn't believe it. The only reason you guys don't notice that is because you have the float that refills your pool every day, right? So if you evaporate a ½ inch a day, you won't notice that because the filler is filling that water back up. Turn that water leveler off for a day or so. You will see how much water you lose in 1 day. So in a month, for a 40 by 10 pool, you can lose almost 1 foot of water in evaporation. Is that crazy? I mean, that's a lot of water, right? And the only reason I can prove it to people is I show them a chart. People look at me and go, Bill, you're crazy. I go, here's the chart. It tells you. You know what I mean? So you lose a lot of water. So what happens when you evaporate water, okay, what happens is if the calcium hardness level is correct, and it should be between 200 and 400 parts per million, the ideal calcium hardness range, right? But what happens is as we evaporate water every day, our fill line that fills the pool has to fill that water back in. And what happens is because the hardness water is in that tap water that's refilling our pool, the calcium continues to build up and build up and build up, right? Does that make sense to everybody? So what happens is once that calcium hardness is above 400, right into the 500 to 600 range, now the solids, the minerals, that white stuff, that white calcium stuff, instead of evaporating away with the evaporation, now the actual water is evaporating, but the minerals are staying behind. Does that make sense? So what happens is we need to fix this, right? Because the more minerals that stay behind, the more buildup we have on the tile, the more buildup that happens inside the salt cells, the more surface scaling what happens, and that's just a rougher surface, you know what I mean? I don't know if you guys have, anybody have a 2 or 3, 4-year-old pool? Or are we all pretty new? I'll tell you what happens. The first year they go, this pool's beautiful, it's been perfect, right? I hardly had to do anything, the water's awesome, the surface is smooth, you know what I mean? And then after a year or so, all of a sudden the surface becomes rougher. You know what I mean? It's not as smooth as it used to be. And that's just because the water chemistry is out of whack and it's creating that scenario for you, okay? So it's very, very important that you keep the calcium hardness in check. But here's how you do it. Of course, it's the worst scenario. We have to drain water, right? We have to drain our water down and get the minerals out of our pool and refill our pool with fresh water. Even though the water's hard, it's still less hard than it was before because it just compacts and combines. Does that make sense to everybody? So what I'm trying to get at is in order to keep, the tough thing here is in Arizona, most people say if you have a pool, you're going to have buildup on your tile, you're going to have buildup on your cell and the filters. And they're right. You know why? Because we all have lives and we don't have time to sit and watch our pool every single day and test and drain all the time. We just don't have time, you know what I mean? But if you really, really want to make sure you have no buildup on the tile and the tile looks new forever and you don't have buildup on your salt systems and buildup on the filters and so forth, keep your alkalinity and your pH in line and keep your calcium hardness between 200 and 400 parts per million. You will never see calcium on your tile, I promise you. But it's very hard to do that, right? Because every day you're evaporating all the water, every day you're filling with hardness. So primarily I would say you should drain your pool every 2 years. Every 2 years you should completely drain your water out of your pool and refresh your pool. A lot of people get into the scenario as the very first year it was very easy to maintain because the water's balanced, you know what I mean? Right out of the tap, the water has to be about 7.4 in pH, right? Because we drink it. So the city or the state has to make sure that water is good for you to drink, in other words. So in our tap water, there's sodium, there's chlorine, and there's a pH level of about 7.4 to 7.6. So, because they know we're going to drink that tap water. We all drank out of the hose. Every one of we've all drank out. Maybe you ladies don't do stuff like that. But us guys, when we were kids, we've all drank out of a hose. I have at least anyway. But it's got to be good for you. You know what I'm saying? So that's the state has to make sure the water balance is correct for us to do that. So the moral of the story is keep your pH in line, keep your alkalinity in line, and keep the calcium hardness in line, and you'll be able to maintain and prevent that buildup on the tile. Okay? Any questions so far? So real quick, with the draining of the pool, you can do two things. You can drain the pool completely and refill completely and kind of start from scratch, right? Or you can periodic drain, and that's what I do on my pool. What I do is every now and then, every couple months, I'll check my level. I go, hey, it's starting to rise up. I'll hook a garden hose. Every one of you have a little hose bib on your pool equipment, okay? You may not notice it, but it's there. It's a blue handle or a little red handle. Sometimes they get painted on, and it could just be tan, but it's a regular hose bib. You want to hook your garden hose to that hose bib. Run your garden hose to your front yard, not the neighbors, because the neighbors, you know, be calling on you and stuff like that. But anyway, get the hose where you want the water to go. Turn your pump on, right? High speed or low. Low speed obviously is going to be slower moving water. High speed, faster moving water. And basically open the ball valve, right? That's going to siphon water out of your pool and put it outside. And you're going to start to see the water drop down, right? Don't go inside and watch a good football game, because before you know it, you'll be a foot or two low. But what I'm trying to get at is take an inch out of your pool. It's a lot of water. 1 inch of water out of your entire surface area of your pool is a heck of a lot of water. And let that pool fill back up an inch. And do that a few times, you know what I mean, until you start to see the calcium level come back in ideal range. Does that make sense? It's more work, don't get me wrong, because you've got to watch the hose, you know what I mean? You've got to siphon the water off a little bit, maybe 3 or 4 or even 5 times, you know what I mean? Rather than just dropping a hose and sucking all the water out and refreshing all the water, you know what I mean? I do it because I don't like to drain my pool completely. I just siphon the water. Anybody have fish tank? No one? I'm the only fish guy. Fish tank, you got to do the same thing. You got to maintain the pH. You got to maintain the alkalinity in the water. You got to drain the water off every now and then. So nothing's different in water compared to a fish tank or a pool. It's all the same scenario. So it's something that you want to get used to doing. But again, if you don't feel comfortable with it, call us. We can come out and drain it for you, or we can at least explain it and how to do it. Sir. Fill it back up with a hose. Yeah, the autofill is basically, the autofill on a pool is just to cover evaporation and a little bit more, but it'll just take forever. So you'd be better off just dropping the hose back in the pool and refilling it. Okay, and that's why I say, you know, for that first year, the pool looks awesome. You're not adding very many chemicals, and all of a sudden, in that second and that third year, you're putting more in to make that pool look good. It's because the water level and the balances are getting more out of whack. You know what I mean? They're not staying stable like they should be, right? So again, keep your pH, alkalinity, and your calcium hardness in check. You will not have buildup or very little buildup, and basically you'll have a stainless pool. The irritation to your skin and eyes won't be there. So it's definitely good conditions for you to have. And remember, right, again, high alkalinity, high pH, high calcium hardness puts you into the scaling part of the pool. So if you think about it, acid, right, lowers the pH and helps break down that calcium, right? So if you have a good pH level, it's continually working on that calcium that's building up. So it's breaking it down. If you have your high pH very high and your calcium hardness really high, that's when you really get the buildup on your tile and the filters and the salt cell. Does that make sense to everybody? Am I losing anyone? I'm trying to make it real simple so I keep everybody interested. You know what I mean? Any questions at all? All right, so, sorry.
Is well water a lot different than city water?
For sure. For sure. Well water, I would say, would be a little bit more hard as far as hardness goes, but it just all depends where it comes from. You know what I mean? I'm assuming well water has to be sanitized to some condition, you know what I mean? Because you're going to be drinking it just like, or using it for your clothes and so forth. But, you know, I don't know, I couldn't give you the true answer of that, but I would say check it just like anything else and just make the adjustments that you need. Okay? So the next thing is, let's go over chlorine, right? The biggest thing about chlorine is it's our sanitizer. Without free chlorine, and that's the true word, is free chlorine. Without free chlorine, our pools would be green and they would be unsanitized to swim in, right? That's why people think chlorine is the most important chemical level, because it makes the pool look good. You know what I'm saying? But just because the pool water is clear and looks good has nothing to do with this, you know, if it's healthy or not, right? So you could have crystal clear looking pool, but that water could be very aggressive, or it could be very, you know, detrimental to your health. It could be an unhealthy situation, right? So just always make sure you check everything. Don't just check and keep balance of the chlorine. So free chlorine level should be between 1.0 and 3.0. And again, before I go any further, there's a ton of information online, right? And everybody has a different opinion of things. I'm just giving you my opinion and how I keep my pool. And honestly, I'm pretty close to where if you keep with what I'm telling you, you'll be able to maintain a pretty nice pool. But anyway, free chlorine. Now, the biggest misconception about chlorine is people think, well, if I have a salt system, I can't use liquid or I can't use tablets. It's all free chlorine. It just comes in different fashions, right? So this particular is a salt cell. Probably most of you have a salt system, right? Salt system, all this is we put sodium into the water. As the sodium, there's 2 particles of sodium, comes into the salt cell. The salt cell has a small, very low voltage electrode that comes in contact with the sodium and creates a chlorine gas, right? That chlorine gas is called free chlorine. That gets outputted through the salt system into the water, and it kills pathogens, it kills algae, it kills stuff that we as humans bring into the water, sweat, urine, lotions. It basically sanitizes the water for us, right? Now, if you have a salt system, you can use liquid chlorine, no problem. This is just a liquid form of free chlorine. You can put a floater with tablets in your pool if you want, even though you have a salt system. Some pools are very large pools. There's 50, 60,000 gallon pools out there. We just did a 90,000 gallon pool. You know, that's huge. That's a huge pool. One salt system is not going to be able to keep up in the summer. So what they do is they'll take some tablets like this, put it in a floater, and they'll float some chlorine as well, combined, you know what I mean? And then in the winter, it's not needed. The chlorine salt cell will be able to keep up with it because there's not such a demand on the water. Does that make sense? So you can put liquid in a salt pool. You could put tabs in a salt pool. It's all the same stuff. It's just a different form of how it comes in contact with the water, okay? Salt cell is basically produced chlorine by increasing or decreasing the percentage. The higher percentage, the more free chlorine you get. The lower percentage, the less, okay? With the tabs and the floater, the more tabs you put in, the more chlorine you get. But the difference between tablets is the tablets have to get broken down. They have to disintegrate to create free chlorine, right? The difference between this and this is instant but doesn't last very long, right? This is not instant, but it lasts longer because it's breaking down and kind of consistently giving chlorine. This is now, and then it gets burned off very quickly. Does that make sense to everybody? Where your benefit is having a salt chlorine generator, because when the pump is on, it's giving you that same consistent level every day of free chlorine, right? With this is high chlorine and then low chlorine. This is kind of consistent, you know what I mean? But the problem with floaters is if you forget to put the tabs in, the pool goes green, right? If you forget to put the liquid in, the pool goes green. With the salt chlorinator, it's there every day watching your pool for you. Does that make sense? So there's kind of some give and takes. Me, you would think I would have a salt chlorine. No, I got a floater in my pool. I'm not scared to tell you, I got a floater in my pool. But here's what I do different. Anybody have a floater in the pool? Let me tell you what I would recommend. I've done this for about the last 2 years, about a year and a half. They're called sunken treasures. It's a little sunken treasure, looks just about this small. It spins, pops open. You can put 3 tablets in the sunken treasure. You can buy them online for about 22 bucks on Amazon. You put your tabs in, you twist the cap together, you toss it in the middle of the pool, it sinks, right? And it dispenses the chlorine from the bottom up, right? What I like about it is when it floats, it's out of tabs. I love that. As a guy, you know what we do? We look and we go, we think there's chlorine in that thing, you know what I mean? But there could be nothing in there, right? So I like the sunken treasure. You put your tabs in. When it's floating, you know it's out. You put your 3 tabs in. It goes back down to the floor, and away you go. Real quick, on these floaters, they're great. They've worked for years and years and years. This used to be the only form of the way you how many have old parents that have this thing floating around in the pool? We all have, right? So the reason I like the sunken treasure over this is simply because the UV rays from the sun removes our chlorine from our water, right? It just breaks down our free chlorine. So when this is floating on top of the pool, all of our chlorine is at the very top of our water, right? And basically, it's getting removed faster. Where with the sunken treasure, it's down below, it's not affecting the chlorine as fast, therefore you don't use as much. So that's my little piece of information for you, so if you ever use that. And then the other thing is, if you do have a floater, I highly recommend you keep this away from your steps, because these will create a low pH situation just around this floater and will stain the top of your steps. So be very careful with these. Just push them away if you see it hanging around the steps, in other words. Okay? Any questions at all? Okay. So again, with a liquid chlorine, if you think, you want to just help your pool out even though you have a salt system, add free chlorine. This is just a good liquid chlorine. It happens instantly and it will kill any bacteria that's in the water. The only thing about liquid chlorine is it contains about a 13 parts per million in pH. So what does this do? Rises your pH, right? So then you've got to add this, and then you got to put a little acid in to counterbalance that. That's why a lot of people don't use liquid chlorine. No problem with it, but that's why people don't use it, okay? So it does affect that pH level.
What about adding more salt?
You never need to. Sodium doesn't evaporate. Okay, the only way you're going to lose salt is either through a heck of a cannonball competition, or you got a leak in the pool. I mean, that's just the two ways. Now, the biggest misconception about sodium loss is this salt cell will give you the salt test, but as the salt system gets dirty, it gives you an inconsistent test. So people, all of us, we look at it and go, it says low salt. We need to add salt. We rush to the store and we start pouring in salt, right? But what happens is the sodium has not gone anywhere. It doesn't evaporate. So the sodium always stays in the water. It was just a salt cell that was dirty, giving you the wrong reading. So if any time you think you need to add salt to your pool, go get an independent test. I highly recommend even buying either a sodium tester, which is digital, but they're pretty pricey, but they have just the little strips just like so. And it'll tell you exactly what the salt level is. So before you think you need to add salt, make sure you test. All right? Any questions so far? Yeah, go ahead.
What's the difference between white muriatic acid and muriatic acid?
It's yellow. Nothing. It's just the way that the manufacturer designed it. The biggest thing you want to check is on the box, find out how much the muriatic acid is in percent. A lot of acid out there is around 16 to 18%, but you want to be into the 30 and above. If you go to pool supply stores, well, I'm going to tell you after this class, I'm just opening, we're in just the first week of opening our own retail store. So you guys will be able to come here to our office and purchase muriatic acid and liquid chlorine and tablets and salt and everything like that. So I didn't want to crack it open too much because we're just into the getting it going phase, but I would love for you to come to us. We're going to give you a better deal than most people out there.
Yeah, on one of our strainers,
Yeah.
the O-ring went out on it.
Yeah.
And we live on the west side of Phoenix.
Yeah.
So we went to a pool place, and the guy right away, he recognized, oh, you got a presidential pool. He didn't have the O-ring.
Yeah.
But he had an O-ring. He says, well, try this until you can get another one.
Yeah.
And that worked until we did get another one.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the store that you're talking about putting here,
Yeah.
is there going to be one on the west side too?
No, I'm just doing, it's our service department. We used to be right outside of this door, but we moved over to the next office. Same building, just one door over, but we have our own office, so it's our entire department, but in the very front is going to be all retail. I'm not going to carry pool floats and stuff like that, but just general chemicals. The good thing is, though, you walk in, you buy something that you need, and we're here for questions. You know what I mean? We'll help you out. We're not going to try and sell you. The biggest thing I don't like to see you guys do is come out of a Leslie's like this. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying bad about Leslie's or anybody out there, but they tend to trying to sell you something. One biggest thing I can tell everybody online and here is you will never need a clarifier, an algicide, put this in and add this. You never need it. You simply need muriatic acid, a continual form of free chlorine, and of course, if your acid is low, you'll need soda ash. If your alkalinity is low, you'll need baking soda. But that's it. Your pool will stay healthy. It will stay good forever. It will look crystal clear if you just do the basics. Okay, you don't need algicide. Okay, going over the free chlorine. Have anybody heard the word shocking your pool? Let me explain what shocking your pool is. When you fill the pool originally, it's standard, just copacetic water, right? Now, we need to make that standard water a chlorine water or free chlorine water, right? So what we do is we come in and we add a liquid chlorine right away when we start your pool up. The reason for that is it's the fastest acting free chlorine you can put in a pool. So what that does is that takes this natural standard water and spikes the chlorine and shocks that water, okay? Being a chlorinated water now because we've shocked it. We've put all this free chlorine in. So shocking basically states that it's taking standard water to a 10 point per million free chlorine level for a minimum of 12 hours, right? Shocking the pool. Now, should you guys shock your pool? Never. You know why? Because you should never test your water and have no chlorine. The only time you ever shock your pool is when you test your water and you have 0 free chlorine. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? So you have no chlorine in the water. Then you need to shock it and then maintain it. So what I would recommend is get you a gallon of liquid chlorine, pour 1 gallon of liquid chlorine in your pool while the pump's circulating. That's going to shock that water, and then you need to maintain it, either through a floater or your salt system, or just continually adding liquid chlorine. It's going to get expensive if you continually add liquid chlorine because it burns off the fastest, it reacts the fastest, but it burns off the fastest. Does that make sense? So in my pool, let's say I need to shock it. I'll come over here, I'll put a gallon of liquid chlorine in, I'll run it, I'll put tabs in my floater, and then I'll maintain it with the floater. I'll shock it with the liquid and maintain it with the floater. I'll shock it with the liquid, maintain it with the salt system. Does that make sense to everybody? So just, you know, that's the reason you shock your pool. It's just to get it sanitary, make sure it kills all the pathogens and algae, and then maintain that free chlorine, okay? One big thing in Arizona that people have trouble with chlorine is it's called phosphates. Anybody heard or anybody know what phosphates are? Phosphates come from rain, wind, dirt, landscaping, grass, just about anything, okay? Phosphates are in just about anything that enter the pool. Now what phosphates do is basically kind of helps promote algae, right? It helps grow, not necessarily grow, but it helps it along, in other words, you know what I'm saying? So what happens is as the phosphates increase, it allows the algae to grow, therefore you need more chlorine to kill the algae, right? So what happens is our goal is we want to use less. We want to use less liquid, we want to use less tabs, we want to lower the percentage on our cell. The more we use this, the more money comes out of our pocket. The more we use this, the more money comes out of our pocket. The more we utilize our salt cell, the less lifespan we have on the cell, right? So the goal is we want to, so if you have a problem, all of a sudden you would put 3 tablets in the floater, right? Or you would, let's say, have a 60% on your cell, and it used to be perfect. All of a sudden, I have 3 tabs in my floater, and my pool's going green. What's going on? Why is it? It used to work perfect, and now it's not doing its job. It's because phosphates, right? Phosphates are promoting algae growth, so now you need to put more in it. So what you would get, before I go any farther, phosphate levels should be as close to 0 as possible. 100, 200, not too bad. But what happens is anybody live on a green belt to where you have like an open view fence with a golf course or grass park behind you? Primarily, you get a lot of phosphates because you get a lot of grass, you get a lot of moisture and stuff that gets into your pool. Or, you guys are going to laugh at this, it's the neighbor's tree that drops all the leaves. Why is it always the neighbors? It's never our tree, is it? It's always the damn neighbors or the HOA tree that's dumping stuff in our pool. I don't get it. But anyway, that's the type of stuff that gets in your water and affects your phosphate level. You know what I mean? So now you're just battling this water. So if you ever have trouble with maintaining your free chlorine, which should be 1.0 to 3.0, check your phosphate level. It's called phos-free is what you would get. You simply pour in phos-free, breaks down the phosphate level, right? Kind of backs that algae off a little bit, and then all of a sudden, the 3 tabs that you've been putting in is now maintaining the pool the way it should be. Same with the chlorinator, right? Does that make sense, everybody? So keep an eye on that phosphate level. Here's the only way to do it is to buy a phosphate kit. It's a little test strip, just kind of like something like this. Or you just take it to a pool supply store and they'll test it for you. So if you ever get into that, hey, you know, I've been adding 3 tabs for 2 years and all of a sudden these 3 tabs are not keeping my pool chlorinated like it should be, and what you'll see is your chlorine level is going down and down because it's trying to fight against that algae more, right? The more algae, the more chlorine you need. The more, as soon as the free chlorine comes in contact with algae, it now is burned off. It's no longer free. It's called combined chlorine. Don't worry about that because I don't want to go into too much detail, but it becomes combined chlorine, and combined chlorine is used up free chlorine, right? Here's a perfect example. When you go, we've all swam probably in a public pool, right? You ever walked into a public pool and go, golly, you smell it, right? Everybody in here thinks, whoa, the chlorine is way too high. It's actually false, right? When chlorine comes in contact with algae and urine and sweat, it gives you that smell. So the smell you're smelling is free chlorine coming in contact with urine, with sweat, with lotions. Disgusting, right? You'll never swim in a public pool again, right? That's why you have your own, right? So what I'm trying to get at is there's a lot of different chemistry. Our mind, when we were young, going, man, they got way too much chlorine in this pool. The fact is there's so many people swimming, it's all burned off. There's no free chlorine in the water anymore. It's called combined chlorine, and that's a state for a green pool because there's no free chlorine. So back to the shock thing. If you don't have free chlorine, shock your pool first. Maintain it with either the salt cell or the tablets. Yes. Yeah. No, different. Totally different. Let me go over stabilizer. And I don't really go into stabilizer too much just because once it's in the pool, you really don't need to maintain it. But let me explain what stabilizer is. Let's say we had 2 pools side by each. Exact same system, exact same scenario. This pool has a free chlorine and this pool has a free chlorine. This pool has stabilizer. This pool has no stabilizer. The free chlorine with the pool with no stabilizer will get burned off almost immediately. Within 24 hours to 48 hours, whatever you've put into it as far as free chlorine will be gone. With a stabilized pool, that free chlorine hangs around the pool longer, right? So therefore, it's kind of a protectant from the UV rays. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, if you have a tablet system, right? If you have these pucks are about 60%, you know, I don't know each manufacturer of each puck, but I would say generally 50 to 60% of these tablets are stabilizer and 50% are trichlor, which is just a free chlorine, right? So what happens is when you have a tablet system, you want your stabilizer to be 30 to 50. Now that's the standard national pool association level that you should be at, 30 to 50. If you have, and the reason for that, by the way, is the more tabs you put in the floater, the more stabilizer you get. Once your stabilizer gets to a certain level, it will actually counteract and start to block the free chlorine from doing what it's supposed to. Therefore, you end up draining your pool down. Does that make sense? If you have a salt system, you need to maintain a 60 to 80 parts per million of stabilizer. The reason for that is the free chlorine that comes out of the salt system is unstabilized chlorine, right? So the sun is going to almost want to break that down fast. So you need to maintain a higher stabilizer so the UV rays from the sun don't break that free chlorine up as fast as it wants to. Does that make sense to everybody? So if you have a floater, 30 to 50 stabilizer. If you have a salt system, you want to be 60 to 80. Here's a perfect example. A pool customer calls us up and says, hey, you know, I've got my salt cell at 80% and it's barely giving me enough chlorine, right? But the pool looks good. So what's happening is that free chlorine's coming in and killing all the algae, but it's just getting burned off right away, right? So then what happens, you have to raise the percentage of your chlorinator because you're thinking you need more chlorine. So there's two types of pools. You could have a pool that has zero free chlorine, that is green as could be. Then you could have a pool with zero free chlorine, but looks fantastic. The difference is this free chlorine, the pool is just not getting enough at all. This pool is getting enough free chlorine to keep it sanitized and clean, but the free chlorine is not hanging around. It's not hanging around long enough. So the scenario would be is if you're down to a zero free chlorine, we shock the pool, right, and then maintain it. So that's where that stabilizer kind of comes in. Am I losing anybody there? That's why I don't want to go into stabilizer. But we've added stabilizer to your pool, and you should be generally in the right level for you because we have a science now. We know exactly how much gallons you have in your pool, and we put the right amount in. But for some reason, if we don't, you let us know. We'll come out and take care of that for you. But again, salt systems, 60 to 80 stabilizer, regular chlorine, either through the tablet or liquid, 30 to 50. Sorry. Never. Just like salt, it doesn't evaporate, it always stays in the water. If you're losing stabilizer, it's because you're either draining your water. Some of you does anyone have a backwash system filter that you have to backwash? No, raw cartridge, good for you. People like backwashing filters. Instead of taking the filters apart and cleaning them, they pull a plunger up and they get to flush the filter out, right? But when you flush water out, you're taking all those minerals and you know, the free chlorine, you're taking your stabilizer and your sodium and you're flushing it out of your pool. So then you have to continually add those back, you know what I mean? So there's a give and take with there, in other words. So for me to you, you know, just you shouldn't lose sodium and you shouldn't lose stabilizer. And again, before you add anything, check at a pool supply store. Go to a pool supply store, check the levels first, and then if they say, hey, you need to add salt, then add salt, you know what I mean? Or hey, you need to add stabilizer, then add your stabilizer, okay? Any questions so far? I want to bring one thing up that's super cool that I've been using myself. Ken Chandler, who's a vice president of presidential pools, he uses, and they work awesome, okay? Again, I'm not a sales guy, but I will tell you if I use it, I'll show it to you because I think they're cool. These RXs, they're $70 right out the gate, right? They're not very cheap. But what I like about them is this little basket drops inside your pump basket, okay? And that's it. And what it does is it secretes a mineral and goes out to the pool. You don't smell it, you don't see it, you wouldn't even know it's in the water, right? You don't feel it, doesn't affect your eyes. But what I like about it is as that water goes through the pool and back through the pump, it comes in contact with a solenoid in here, and that basically breaks down pathogens in your water. It breaks down algae, okay? The biggest breeding ground for algae, where do you guys think the biggest breeding ground for algae is in your pool and equipment? I'll tell you, filters, right on the button. The biggest breeding ground for algae is in your filter. Why? Because it's full of water that's stagnant when the pump is off. Heat is on. You'd be amazed. You'd be amazed how warm inside that filter is when water's not moving. You know what I mean? It's just a breeding ground for algae. When people see algae in the pool, it's throughout the entire equipment. Okay, so you got to treat it as one. You know what I mean? So what I like about this again is when the water comes back, it's breaking down pathogens in the water. It's breaking down algae in the water. Therefore, you use less tablets. You use less percentage on the salt cell. Okay, so it's kind of a helper. They do make a chemical that you can kind of keep it charged with. I don't recommend that. I would say these are good for about 6 months. So it's about twice a year. But it breaks down. It helps. You know, I mean, for me, it's a no-brainer. I don't like stuff that I have to maintain. I'm just simple like that. If I can put something in and not have to mess with it, that's my kind of deal. So I like it because it drops right in the basket. It does its thing. 6 months later, over the shoulder in the garbage, I drop a new one in and I'm good for another 6 months. Again, they're not cheap. They're $70, but for me to you, it works well. I have one in my pool, therefore that's why I tell you about it. Okay? Any questions? The pump basket, I'm sorry, the pump basket. You know the basket that you clean at the pump? You take the lid off, the clear lid. You got, yeah. You got one in the decking, that's the skimmer lid. Okay, you know the skimmer lid in the concrete or the travertine, that's the skimmer basket. That's basically taking care of all the top stuff. The one over at the almond pump, the variable speed pump, it's the clear lid that you pop off. You'll have a white basket in there. You know that one? This will go right inside of it, right? You could put this in the skimmer, but for me, all the water from the pool goes through the pump basket no matter what. So I put it in that basket because it's going to treat every bit of that water. Even though all the water is going to go through, but see, you only get so much that goes through the skimmer. The rest either goes from the drain into the pump and then back to the pool. You know what I mean? All the water doesn't go through the skimmer. You see what I'm saying? So that's why I put it in the pump basket. And it works. Yeah, you get a little debris on it, but when you're cleaning the basket, you're cleaning it anyway. You pull the little basket out of the big basket, you dump the big basket, you put the little basket back in the big basket, back on, and away you go. Maintenance free. Every 6 months, you toss it, you pop a new one in. I like it. Same with the sunken treasure. I'm not going to tell you something that I don't use myself because I'm not a salesperson for one, and two, I don't like to promote any product that I don't know works. You know what I mean? I'm not going to tell you, hey, get this, and I have no knowledge of it. I have knowledge of this because it works. We have a lot of customers like them, and it's just an additive to your defense of your pool, let's say. All right? Any questions at all? Anything I can go back over with you? Did you guys learn a little something today? Yeah, go ahead.
If you drain your pool, would you then have to add more salt and more?
Absolutely. Yeah, because you're taking, and let me just go into depth, just a quick second. The general, it's called total dissolved solids, right? And I don't want to get too far into this, but total dissolved solids are the sum of all your chemical levels, temperature, sodium, chlorine, calcium hardness, pH, alkalinity. It's the grand sum of everything. It's basically called saturation index. So the total dissolved solids in a normal pool is generally 2,000 and below. But as things get out of whack and out of line, the total dissolves go up, right? And so that's why for that first year of maintaining a pool seems very easy, and then over time it's harder to maintain because the minerals everything's out of line now, you know what I mean? So you're working harder to maintain that water that a year or so ago was so easy to maintain, you know what I'm saying? So it's better off for me to you to just drain the pool. Listen, it's expensive to drain a pool, but really not that bad. If you think about it, if it cost you $100 to drain your pool and refill it, that's not bad if you think about, because what you're going to spend over time fighting this water to keep it clean and sanitized and working properly, you're going to spend $100 over the year. I mean, you just will, you know what I mean, and chemicals and add this and add that. You'd be better off coming out, draining the pool, refilling it with fresh water. Of course, you have to add the stabilizer. Of course, you have to add the salt back, but it's fresh again and it's easier to maintain. All right? Again, my time's up. I wish I could keep you guys in here longer. If you have any questions, get with me right now. I'm happy to answer them. But I appreciate you guys being here. I hope everybody learned something. Andrew, anybody online? Any questions? No questions? Again, just if you have any questions or you have any problems or you're in a pickle or you're frustrated, just get with us. Give us a call. You know, I'm not going to tell you we're the best of everything. We make mistakes. We have trouble sometimes, just like any other company, but we do care about you. That's why we do this. You know what I mean? And we want to make sure you understand your pool as best you can. Again, there's so much. If you have any questions, go online. You know, here's my thing about online this though, you know what I mean, is online you never know what you're reading, you know what I mean? I mean, we're only as good as what people tell us online, but from me to you, you don't need nothing, just the basics, you know, what I told you to get. You don't need to have a bunch of chemicals around your house, just standard muriatic acid, some free chlorine if you need it, and that's about it, and your pool will look good for life. So, all right? Thanks for being here, folks. I really appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah, we have them. If you want to go next door, if you go right out of this door and just make a right